Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our session today. I am Sarah Rice, editor of the HR World. I'm going to be chairing the session today. I'm really looking forward to having you. Really great to have you all here, and really looking forward to some interesting discussion. We have had a really high registration and people joining us today for this event, so it's obviously something that everybody is looking at. And of course, at the beginning of 2022, you know, HR and people leaders are finding themselves dealing with a myriad of problems caused by the pandemic. And front and centre of this is the need to improve inclusive hiring and employment practice. But despite there being widespread conversation and a seemingly significant will to bring change to the workforce, there seems to be a lack of progress. We have a fantastic executive advisory board here at the HR World, and one of them, Dr. Nima Pasha, who is the diversity and inclusion lead for Henley Business School, conducted a piece of research last year called The Equity Effect. And, you know, the evidence is out there now that businesses that actively confront inequity and specifically around racism with practical measures and can expect to see an improvement in their employees' job satisfaction, loyalty, creativity, and ultimately value, recording an average revenue 58% higher of those which did not. So it does seem out of kilter that we sit here at the beginning of this year and we're still having such big problems around hiring. So today, part of this, of course, is the jobs market itself is in a state of flux. We have skill shortages, the Great Resignation. We know people are making different choices about how and where they want to live and work. So what can be done? Today, we're going to look at a very specific solution, how to redefine and improve the job description process and what this means specifically for inclusion and diversity. And to help with us, us with this is Hannah Waddington, founder and MD of Maru Search Consultancy. Hannah and her team, Hannah's company is one of our partner companies, and her and her team have been championing not just evolution, but revolution in the JD process for the last year. So they've been living and breathing this. And Cynthia Davis, who founded a cutting edge firm, Diversify, to really help businesses get right to the heart of inclusive hiring, also joins us. But before they introduce themselves properly, a tiny bit of housekeeping. First, as it has become second nature to everyone, please do make sure your mics are on mute and your videos are off. I'm sure that's already done for you, but please just make sure that that is the case. We're going to be hearing from Hannah first and then Cynthia, followed by a Q&A. I know all of us are really keen to have a fairly informal discussion in terms of, really get your questions and your chat in. I will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A boxes. So if you can keep the questions to the Q&A boxes and the chat in the chat, that would be fantastic. I really want to get as many questions in the second half of this session answered as possible. So, just keep them coming thick and fast. So that's introductions for our guest speakers today. Hannah, would you like to go first?
Of course, thanks, Sarah. So as Sarah mentioned, my name is Hannah Waddington and I am the Managing Director of Maru Search Consultancy. Maru, first and foremost, is a recruitment business, but we want to do, as Sarah mentioned, do a lot more than purely put candidates into organisations. We're looking at the entire recruitment process, and I'll be talking a lot more about kind of the different elements of that, and obviously one big part of that is job descriptions. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to talking about kind of some of the findings that we've found over the last kind of year, and obviously ways that we can support businesses in trying to make the process better.
Brilliant, thank you so much. Yeah, and I don't know if my Wi-Fi is a bit sticky, so apologies if it's me, but yeah, just bear with us. We're in this new world of online. Not new anymore, though, is it? We're all used to it now. And Cynthia, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, the good old Wi-Fi. So if mine goes as well, it's been a little bit naughty this morning, but hopefully, fingers crossed, you can all hear me. So I'm Cynthia Davis, and I'm the chief exec and founder of two organizations. One which is Bain Recruitment, which is a diversity and inclusion consultancy firm, and the other one is a tech platform called Diversifying.io, which really works with organizations that are looking to connect and engage with diverse talent across all protected characteristics. So JDs for us is a really important part of what we do. We work in terms of advising our clients around how to write more inclusive job descriptions that will connect and engage with a much wider talent pool. So hopefully today I'll be able to just share some of the tips and some of the do's and don'ts around that kind of process. But yeah, I suppose for me, having been in the recruitment sector for about 22 years, some of the things I've seen, badly written job descriptions, are just horrible. So yeah, I think it's really about unlearning some of those bad behaviors that we sometimes get caught into, and looking at what's the best processes to make sure you're connecting and engaging with a much wider, more diverse talent pool.
That's fantastic. I know I'm particularly excited about this, the sort of the connection between the two, what you've both been looking at, because it's the kind of the umbrella issue of JDs in the first place, in the sense that they, Hannah, I think you did an event last year, and I remember you saying it's like it just hasn't changed for like 40 years or something. So the whole concept itself is remarkably out of date. And then really drilling down into a kind of a really practical deep dive into this specific issue around inclusion, and how actually taking that issue on sort of will open up a huge amount of new thinking and capability within, the actual hiring process itself, and kind of how that will make a difference to business. Brilliant. Well, I think we should get started then with Hannah. Do you want to kind of take the reins? I know you've got a few slides.
Excellent. So first of all, there's going to be 3 polls, I think, throughout the event. So we're going to start off with a bit of audience interaction. So we're going to start off with poll number 1. So it'd be really great to get everyone's thoughts before we go into the slides as to your thoughts on this particular poll. So how well do you think your organization currently handles its job description process? So we've got various options here: very well, well, average, below average, poor, it's a mess, or we don't know. So we will wait. We're 50.
All of the above, maybe.
So we will just wait until all the answers come through. In the meantime, I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So hopefully you guys can all see my presentation. Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. We're 89% there in terms of the poll. Oh, we're now 86%. Not quite sure what's happening there. I'll do a countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and we will end the poll.
Yeah, put a cup of tea there.
So the majority, so 42% of people said average, 35% well, 90% said very well, some people said poor, no one said it's a mess, so that's pretty good. But yeah, kind of need for improvement, I think, with the majority of people saying that their job description process is average. So I, as you can see on my screen, I do think that the job description process doesn't just need some work. I think it needs a bit of an overhaul, as Sarah mentioned. I do think that it hasn't really changed in a really long time. Lots of other things have changed in the meantime, and technology specifically from a recruitment perspective. LinkedIn, for example, has had a huge amount of impact on the job, the recruitment process. But job descriptions generally haven't really changed that much. Just to step back a bit, so when I set up my business, Maru, my background's in recruitment, similar to Cynthia, but I was very keen when I set up my business to not just reinvent the wheel, just keep doing what all the other recruitment businesses have been doing over the last few decades. I wanted to really not just be another recruitment consultancy. And so we looked at the recruitment process. We really stepped back and looked at the entire recruitment life cycle, all the links in the chain. And actually lots of those links are a little bit broken at the moment. And I think I like to think of it, I have like this weird dishwasher analogy, so bear with me for the moment. Like if your dishwasher breaks and you don't get around to fixing it straight away, and then a month goes by, 2 months goes by, 3 months go by, and your dishwasher's still not fixed, and you just get really used to washing your dishes by hand. And you kind of, even though your dishwasher's there taking up a lot of space in your kitchen, you forget that you ever had a dishwasher, and you just think that's the way that things happen. And then suddenly, I don't know, you get a bonus or a windfall, and you decide to get your dishwasher fixed. And you have this amazing epiphany moment thinking like, oh my gosh, my dishwasher is amazing. I can't believe I did without it for such a long time. I think when things are broken for such a long time, we forget they're broken. We just think it's normal to do things that way. And obviously, as I mentioned, technology's had a huge impact on the recruitment market, but actually I want to kind of forget about technology for a moment, even though we are doing this event using technology. I want to talk about the human side of recruitment. So how we as human beings bring other human beings into our work tribe. And I think we need to have a lot more impact on that process. Job descriptions is a part of the recruitment process. It's probably one of the hardest ones to fix, but it really needs to happen. And I think to get it right, it needs some work, and it will be hard work, and it will be a challenge, but I do think the benefits will be massive if we do put that work in. And by doing that, you're not just going to ensure that you're bringing the best people into your organization, but you're also going to be, I'm going to be talking about the job description being a living working document that actually can support your people, not just when to find a job, but actually to be successful within your organization as well. So some stats. We did a survey last year. It is still live. I think you're all going to be sent a link, so it'd be great to get your input into the survey as well. But our findings so far is that 90% of people, we've had about 100 people from the HR and the hiring manager community and the candidates, actually job seekers, come back. 90% of those people think that the job description process needs a major overhaul. So that's, that I don't need to go into more detail. It is what it is. That's 90%. And then I did a poll on LinkedIn last week, actually, and I had about 100 people come back, and it was more of a broader poll around someone's success in their job once they find their job. And I asked people kind of, when you hire a new person into your team, who is responsible for their success? Is it you? Is it them? Or is it a bit of both? Now, 81% of people said it's 50-50. It's just as much the employer's responsibility for that person's success in the job, not just the employee. So I think those two stats together really bring home that we need to take some ownership of this process as employers. My next slide is, so one important thing to clear up is the difference between a job description and a job advert. There's a real grey area here, as there's lots of crossover. And often the job description and the job advert actually are the same thing. I know lots of organisations don't do job adverts as such. They just have a career site with their job description on there as the advert. This is the first decision that you really have to make as an organisation. I don't think companies have actually made that decision. It's just kind of happened. So you've got to work out, are you going to have a job advert and a job description, or is it going to be the same thing? And if it is going to be the same thing, you have to make sure that it is fit for purpose for both of those purposes. You do have to make a proactive decision on that. But both of those documents have a lot of the same principles. So I'm just going to go through a few kind of do's and don'ts, and some might be a little bit of a surprise. So both need to be informative. You need to imagine, if you're writing that job description, that someone external with no knowledge of your business or the job comes away from reading it having really good understanding of what the job is. It might sound really obvious, but so many documents I've read are full of technical jargon and internal buzzwords that actually someone might come away from that still actually not knowing what the job is. So that's really first, and it's harder than it thinks, actually, and it does take a bit of process. needs to be really easy to understand. Don't try and make it sound too clever. Like, I know that again might sound like a bit of a weird thing to say, but you've got to imagine that the person reading it doesn't know what you know. So you've got to not leave any ambiguity there. You can't make it an intimidating document. Someone might not apply, it might intimidate them, and the best candidate might not apply for the role. The next 2 points are quite similar in that it needs to be honest and it needs to set the right expectations. So don't promise anything you can't deliver, and equally don't sugarcoat any elements of the job description that you think someone might not want to know. If it's part of the job, it needs to be on the job description. You're not writing an advert for a 5-star hotel. This is a job description. Someone's going to be paid to do this job. So you need to let them know the bad bits as well. Every job has an element of challenge, has an element that someone might not like. It's still important to be upfront and honest about it. The next point is probably the one that I think lots of people listening into this webinar, if they were very honest with themselves, are quite guilty of not writing job descriptions from scratch. Cynthia, I'm sure you've seen this as well. As someone working in recruitment, you receive job descriptions, and some of them, the different sections are in different fonts. Like, you can literally see the person copying and pasting from other documents that might be a decade old. This is someone's job. This is someone who's spending the majority of their life at work doing this job. It really this is a process that really deserves to be written from scratch. And you've got to treat both documents as external documents as well. Even though they might be used as internal documents too, they are external documents. They're talking to the outside world, so they have to be written in that way. The things that they shouldn't be are sales tools. Again, this might sound weird. I know lots of people are very desperate for talent to join their organization at the moment, but again, you're not advertising a holiday. This is a job. It has to be honest. It has to be, you can't entice people in by promising them things that they're not going to get. It needs to be written by the right person. So often I speak to hiring managers and I say to them, I've got the job description, it doesn't really add up with what we spoke about, and they go, oh, I didn't write it, the HR assistant did. And that's just has to stop. It has to be written by the person hiring it. There are job descriptions that are quite generic, using kind of generic adjectives. You need to be a team player, dynamic, all these different things. You can have those in there, but they really have to mean something. As I mentioned before, it can't be a rehashed document. Each role needs to be its own individual role. And this is something that I think Cynthia might be talking about. Kind of, you can't write a job description with the perfect candidate in mind. You don't know who the perfect candidate is. You know you've got a vacancy. You know you need to bring some skills into the organization. You don't know who that person is. So try and, we often as recruitment consultants go, oh, you placed Dave last year. Can you just get me another Dave? Well, no, because Dave already works for you. We'll get you someone else. So let's have an actual conversation about what you're looking for. And again, as I mentioned, that internal jargon, those those technical terms that you might be very familiar with, that other people might not. You have to ensure that, again, that type of language might intimidate people. And I'm just aware of time, got to one more slide. So as I say, kind of, it takes work, it takes ownership. As I say, kind of be honest in your job descriptions. Don't try and sugarcoat anything. Clarify kind of your true expectations of the person that you want to hire. I really like the sort of kind of considering who you want to hire, not for today, actually for 3 years time. I know you want to fill a gap, but actually if you're hiring a permanent person, you want that person to stay. So they have to be the right person for your organization. Purpose is very important, as we've talked about. So articulate the purpose of the company and the organization and how they link together. And something that I'll always ask hiring managers when they are recruiting, who's going to be happiest in this role? Who's going to really enjoy working for you? And articulating that on a job description is obviously very important. And the don'ts, again, kind of, as I mentioned, generic adjectives. Don't write a shopping list of skills that you're looking for. It needs to be more than that. Don't ask yourself who's going to fit in. So similarly, you don't want to, imagine the perfect person, you know. Don't sugarcoat the opportunity, and as I said, kind of don't fall into the trap of trying to describe an individual on one document. I appreciate there's loads of information there. I think I'm hoping there'll be opportunity to send all this information out to everyone, kind of, but they're just my thoughts on kind of the do's and the don'ts and what should be on a job description and what shouldn't. So I hope that's been helpful for everyone.
Fantastic. Well, it's really helpful. It's amazing how actually just laying it out in simple terms as well makes it so much more understandable, because you can relate it to so many different points along the journey within an organization of where it can go wrong and where it gets really too complicated, or the ownership of it just disappears and the accountability kind of goes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I think the reason that so many job descriptions aren't very good is because it's not an easy thing to do, but actually by taking the time, like, it's not easy, but actually if someone owns it and owns it well, yes, it's challenging, but if you get into the habit of, for each job you're writing a new document, this document is someone's job that they're going to be doing every day. I always say, kind of think about how much time people spend writing their CVs versus how much time is spent writing a job description, and there's a huge imbalance there. And so, you know, it has to be 50-50. It has to be equal.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And I remember just on the job advert thing as well, we were talking earlier last week, and I was saying about the Hannah Shackleton job advert, which was like, men wanted a hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold. It's brilliant. It's like long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honour and recognition in case of success. And you were like, that's not exactly a job description, but it's definitely a good advert.
Exactly. Definitely didn't sugarcoat what he's looking for.
No, don't sugarcoat it. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Brilliant. And just a reminder to everybody as well, obviously, just if you pop any questions or thoughts that you've got in the chat in the Q&A box, obviously I'll be taking note, and we'll be coming back, looping back around after Cynthia as well. So I think we might have another poll, in fact, before we actually hand over to Cynthia.
We do indeed. So here we go. So how well do you think your organisation is currently scoring in inclusive hiring? Give marks out of 10. So let's see how we go. And
I do feel like we should have a countdown clock, really.
I know. We're almost there. Sorry, I didn't share the last results. I will do that.
Yeah, you can make them visible, can't you? Yeah.
3 more people, whoever you are. Seems to have slowed down, so I think we've got everything.
We'll get a good straw poll anyway, at least. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, end poll, share results. Here we go. Can you see that?
Yeah.
The results there. There we go.
So it's interesting. It's definitely in the same way of the sort of the general approach to the job description in itself. It's kind of very in the average bracket, isn't it?
Yeah. So most people said around kind of 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So
yeah, a few right up at the top end as well. So we definitely want to hear from you in the chat. What you're doing right, and if anybody scored in the lower half of it, also just give us some thoughts. And just because, you know, I mean, conversation is what we're here for. I mean, Cynthia, over to you. I mean, that's quite an interesting mix of sort of levels at which people are at.
Yeah, no, it is. And it's really actually good to see, you know, how each organization is kind of taking that inclusive hiring seriously. And I think one of the things that I always hear is people say, of course, we take diversity very seriously. Of course, it's top of our agenda, but it's really the actions of what they do to make that process more inclusive. And I think that's something I kind of really wanted to try and shine a light on today, to say, yes, it's not just about talking about being an inclusive, wanting to run an inclusive hiring process. You actually have to put in the right kind of processes that will then allow for that to actually happen. And again, just, some of the things that Hannah was talking about there around, making things like the job description fit for purpose. That's the first document that you actually have that candidates are going to have as the first interaction with the organization. What are they actually going to see? What's the information that you're putting on there? And that's the first point of information that candidates have in terms of deciding whether they actually want to apply for a job or not. So that is such an important document that I think most people don't put that emphasis on the job description. They just think, well, let's just put the job description out there and let's get loads of candidates coming in, but they don't actually realize how important that tool is in terms of then getting those candidates coming through. So one of the things I always find, and when I talk to a lot of our clients, is really around, well, what's the process that you take when you put a job description together? And a lot of the times is this habit that people just say, well, we recruited for the job like 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and they'll just use the same job description that they used so many years ago and stick that job description out there. And the world has moved on. We know the world has moved on. I mean, from just the last couple of years, so much has happened, in terms of how people are now looking at opportunities, what they're valuing. So if you're still using a document that was written 5-10 years ago that you're trying to recruit for candidates in this current climate, of course, you're not going to have the right kind of, people coming through. So it's really about that constant evaluation of the tools that you're using to attract that talent coming into your organization. And for me, I think it's really trying to get ourselves out of sometimes that lazy habit of just, well, I just need to get people, let's just put it out there and let's just see what happens. But it's really, to Hannah's point earlier on about, you need to take the time to actually really look at that job description. And I think for me, it's looking at things like the language that you're using in that, the tone, the content, what are you putting in there? Who is the audience that you're trying to reach? And I think that's sometimes so important, because we write job descriptions without thinking of the audience that's going to be reading that job description. So if you're writing it and you're just putting, like Hannah said, loads of jargon and loads of words, that's not going to land in the right kind of way with the audience that you're trying to reach. Of course, they're not going to connect. They're just going to look at it and bypass and move on. And I read a stat recently that said most job seekers will make up their minds within 49.7 seconds whether they're actually going to apply for a job or not. And this is just literally by just a quick scan of the information that's on there. So for me, I almost have to kind of think, well, you almost need to take a little bit of a step back and think, well, what are we trying to achieve with the job description? What is the purpose of the job description? Is it to try and attract the right candidates into the organization? Okay, well, talk about the organization first and foremost. Don't just do, we sell the best products and we're the market leading brand. That's lazy, right? You might be Coca-Cola, you might be whatever it is, but what does that mean to me, as the person that's coming to work this? So really articulating the organization, the values, what the organization stands for. Go beyond, almost retell the story again to the audience as if they don't know that you're the biggest brand, but also talk about the part that they will play once they're part of that organization, so it's not just that list of requirements, it's where those people are going to come in and add value to that organization and where they're going to support you on that journey. So that storytelling is so important, and often it's left untold. People just cut and paste this is what the products we make, come and join us if you want, kind of thing. And it's like, that's not exciting, that's not engaging anybody. At the moment there's more jobs than candidates. We know it's a candidate driven market. What's going to make your job stand out versus another organization? It's what you put into it, it's the content that's in that job description. So you have to articulate first and foremost, for me, why somebody would actually want to come and work for you in the first place. So before you even get to the skills bit of what you're looking for, why should I come and work for you? What am I going to get out of it? So it's really articulating what the opportunity is, what the organization offers, the culture. People forget the culture all the time when they're writing job description. If I've never worked in a certain organization, how do I know whether it's the right environment for me, or it's somewhere that I can come in and I can succeed and I can thrive, because I've not worked there before? So articulate what it's like to work in that organization. How supportive are you? What's the environment like? What's the progression like? All those things normally get left out in job descriptions. And I think there's so much focus that's put on kind of must do's and must haves, and we forget about all the other kind of softer skills, which is really selling the opportunity. And that's what we sometimes need to look at, that job description is selling the opportunity to a much wider audience, but also casting an inclusive lens in everything that we're doing within that job description. The way that you are talking to that audience, is it landing in a way that's going to connect with them? If you're trying to reach, for instance, women, and you're putting certain kind of words that, sometimes will put women off, that in itself will have a negative response in terms of what you're trying to achieve. So that lens of inclusion is so important. And sometimes I always find when people talk around, we're trying to be a much more inclusive organization, and then they go and they cut and paste that statement, that diversity statement, which is an equal opportunities organization, and stick it right at the bottom of a job description. To me, you might as well not bother, because that's pointless, right? Candidates by that point have made up their minds whether they want to work for you or not. They haven't even scrolled down right to the end. And all you've done is cut and paste what every other job description has got. There's nothing different about that statement. So I think it's really about articulate, when you are talking that you're an inclusive organization, what does that actually mean? Articulate what that means, articulate what you're trying to do. We're inclusive because we support people from all walks of life, and this is how we do it, and this is what we're trying to do. You don't have to be perfect. Nobody's expecting everyone to be the most inclusive organization, but talk about the journey that you're on. Talk about how you are continuously evaluating yourselves to be more inclusive, and here's how we're doing it, and here's some of our diversity stats, here's our data, here's our equal pay kind of information. All those things mean so much when you are trying to attract diverse candidates. Look at your inclusive benefits that you offer. A lot of the times people forget those on a job description. They just say great perks or competitive salary, end of. Well, okay, I'm a working mum, I might be wanting to have kids and, more kids in the future. Do you offer maternity pay? Do you offer flexible working? Do you offer, childcare vouchers? Do you offer all those perks, and all those benefits? Add value when people are actually evaluating whether they want to apply for a job or not. So don't take it for granted that, people assume that you do offer that without you putting in there. So all that information is really, really important when you are putting in the job description. Again, things to also look out for is when you are trying to attract a much more diverse candidates, talk about, what diversity means for you as an organization. I find a lot of organizations forget that. They just say that, diversity is very important. Well, why is it important to you? Why should I believe when you say diversity is important? But you need to show that. You need to show why it's important. Your statements, your language throughout that whole job description has to articulate what diversity means to you and why it's important to you. So don't take that for granted by just saying, well, of course we need people, we welcome people from all these walks of life, and you put a long list of backgrounds. So what? No one's going to say we don't want people from these backgrounds, but you need to show how you're going to support people from those walks of life once they're in there. What is it about your environment that's going to make those people want to come and work for you? So this is where we've got to get at some of these lazy habits that we do when we write job descriptions, to really put the work in. If we want the candidates to come, and we want great people to come and work for us, we've got to put the work in to really articulate what we're trying to achieve. So that tone, that content, that engagement has to be there to make sure it's the right people that are then going to be applying for the jobs that you're putting out there. And I've got a slide of some kind of do's and don'ts that I've done, because I'm just conscious of time. So I'm going to try and see if I can share. Let me look at this. Do let me know if you can all see that.
Yep, I can see that. Thank you, Cynthia.
Perfect, great. So just a lot of some of the things that I've just been talking about how to make that job description a lot more inclusive. Really things like outlining the right kind of perks. Don't just stick things in there that aren't going to have the right kind of impact. Really look at what it is that you're trying to achieve by putting those perks in there. But again, talk a lot about the company culture. emphasize that enough. If you're wanting to bring on the right kind of people and help with retention, you've got to talk about what people are walking into. Again, one of the things that I find is a lot of people forget candidates with a disability in job descriptions. So whether you're how accessible are your job descriptions to everybody? So those that might need help in terms of reading the job descriptions, there are tools out there that are available to help people be able to assess and read your job description so that no one is left without getting the right kind of information because of the way that the job descriptions are kind of then written. Also things, as I mentioned, around maternity perks or maternity packages, that again is really, really important. Look at advertising flexible working opportunities. I think at the moment, a lot of organizations advertising that hybrid way of working, which is brilliant, but what does that actually mean? How many days is that? Is that 2 days in the office and 3 days from home? Or could people actually choose how they want to work? So articulate when you are saying hybrid, what does that actually mean? So don't always assume that people will interpret it in the way that you're putting it out there. Say that again? Sorry, that's I couldn't do what you said. That's my Siri deciding to join in the conversation there. But again, some of the things to kind of avoid on job descriptions, things like gender specific kind of words, there's nothing worse than putting, you will do this, or she will do this, or he will do this, all those kind of things. Take that out, avoid anything that's gender based in terms of when you are putting a job description out there. Again, how do you eliminate things like racial kind of bias? Make sure that things that could deter people around certain things like, your nationality or your language must be, English must be your first language. Well, that will actually eliminate a lot of people out of that kind of process. Don't add more things that could be barriers, for candidates from different kind of backgrounds if you are trying to run an inclusive process. So make sure that anything that you're putting on there is not going to be deterrent for people to self-disqualify themselves out of that process. So just always be mindful of some of the things that you're putting in there to make sure that everything you do is with that inclusive lens and will allow you to kind of reach and connect more people through the process. So I'm happy to share this as well. So, if anybody wants to kind of refer back to some of the points I've made on there. And I'm just conscious of time, so I will stop talking, otherwise I could talk for England, and allow for a bit of Q&A.
Thank you. Oh my goodness, there's so much in there to unpack. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it, in terms of, if you put the two elements of what we've looked at today together, this idea of kind of, first of all, I've worked in smaller businesses and big corporates and, kind of experienced all sorts of different lenses on JDs. This idea of accountability does seem to be quite an important one, I guess, because actually a lot of what you were talking about there is probably to do with an inherent culture as well, maybe. So I guess, just in your experience, Cynthia, what kind of are the main barriers to achieving that kind of thinking within an organization? When you go in and you're sort of consulting, what are the kind of main things that you're kind of coming up against?
Yeah, I think for me, it's really the idea of what a perfect candidate is. And I think Hannah touched on this a little bit where, somebody said, well, I recruited Dave, so go find me another Dave, and it's that kind of mentality of, that idea of what good looks like, because people have bias, every one of us has some sort of bias, but it's been aware of that bias and how it plays out in a recruitment process, so if you've always hired candidates that have worked in, in these top organizations, what about the ones who've not been afforded those opportunities? Because again, we know it's never playing field. So does that mean that they're not any good because they've not been given those opportunities? So this is where I think sometimes it's that unlearning of what good looks like, that people don't always have to take everything on a job description. Some of the advice I give my clients is look at, recruiting for capabilities, what with the right kind of support, what somebody able to, in the future. So again, that widens the talent pool, because if you're always going to look at people that have always studied at the same university, worked for your top competitors, you almost, it's very few people that you're just moving around. You're not widening the reach of people that you've got access to. Therefore, that whole idea of diversity completely goes out the window, because it's such a narrow pool by you putting all those key criteria in there that people have got to fit certain boxes. So this is a lot, for me, a lot of the advice that we give. But again, it's not just looking at it from just the job description. You've got to look at your end-to-end process, right from when you have your job description, once you've looked at it and you've taken it out and it's as inclusive as it can be, what happens next? Once those applications come through, what's the process? Who's evaluating those CVs? Who's reviewing those CVs? And I always say you almost need to have two people reviewing that, so it takes some of that bias out of that process. Because one person might say, well, actually last time we got people from this, I'm just going to put all the people that have got this kind of background straight through, and the ones that don't out of it. Having somebody else, another layer, reviewing that might say, hang on a minute, why is this person not being put through? They've got this, surely with the additional support they could be as good as this person. So it helps you to make sure that you're removing any of those bias and across that kind of process. But also the interview itself, who's the interviewer, what's the questions that they're asking? Are there questions that could be asked in a way that could be deemed to favor other candidates as well? So you've got to look at it. If you are wanting an outcome that's going to allow you to run a full inclusive process, you have to look at every single stage of that recruitment funnel, right through from putting it out there, around the attraction piece, around the whole process of interviewing, right through to offer stage, to onboarding, and then making sure, as we said, that job description lives to what you've brought somebody in to do. Because if you've asked somebody that this is what they're going to be coming in to do, and then all of a sudden, once they're there, you change it and you throw in different things that weren't discussed, somebody's going to say, well, hang on a minute, that's not what I applied for. That's not what I came here to do. So always make sure it's true to life in terms of what that person will actually be doing as well. So it's a full end-to-end process.
Sure. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because I spoke to a specialist recruitment company working in FE, and they were working with, they were hiring for the first ever diversity and inclusion vice president of a college. And they said that the whole process of actually working through the job description in terms of what that job looked like opened up all these different areas of conversation around the organization to answer some of those core questions in getting the right job description out there. Because obviously, you're kind of trying to attract a lot of different types of people for that role in itself. Yeah. Which I think is really, is why it's sort of a pivotal part of opening up maybe a whole review of that process in the first place. We've had a question come in, and I think this is actually quite interesting, because I think there's a kind of idea that maybe the job description is so broad because it needs to kind of attract a lot of people. So you've got to kind of keep everything in there, if you like. But obviously every organization is also different. So where would you recommend posting jobs to attract a more diverse candidate pool? So I guess this is at the actual, once you've kind of got the job description, what job you're hiring for, how do you then actually get into more diverse and inclusive environments that you want to look at? So we tend to only really use our website and social media, but our industry is quite niche, and we find that we're not getting enough reach to actually find diverse candidates. I've experienced this previously as well, is actually how do you get into the right communities to spread the word? Hannah, would you like to talk to that one?
Yeah, of course. There are quite a lot of specific websites that specialize in different areas. There are also lots of charities that specialize in, for example, there's a brilliant charity in Wales that specializes in getting disabled people into the workplace. And so there are lots out there, and it would be impossible to list all of them, because actually there's a lots of platforms out there. There are also LinkedIn groups, but I think you've got to ask yourself, you can't possibly place that job description on all of them. I think LinkedIn is a really, really good place to start, because lots and lots of pretty much everyone is on.
Oh, I don't know if it's just me, but I feel I've lost your sound, Hannah. Sorry. Oh, she's...
I can't hear you.
Try and wave. Lost your sound. I mean, maybe do you want to pick up on that, Cynthia, while she's working that one out?
Yeah, and to Hannah's point, I think there's a lot of kind of job platforms out there. I mean, you know, we've got a diversity job board, post a job to more diverse candidates, a little bit of a plug from me there. And I'll stick the website in the chats as well. But, you know, it's really trying to look at who are the people that you're trying to connect with, you know, who are the communities that you're wanting to reach. And again, it's, for me, you know, somebody mentioned that they only advertise through their own website and through social media. So if you're not really, you know, an inclusive organization and you're trying to reach more inclusive candidates, the people that know about you obviously going to be the same people that already know about you and the only ones that are going to be going to your website. So sometimes waiting for candidates to come to your website, you know, you're not going to get that level of attraction. So you almost have to go where these candidates are. But when you do go to where these candidates are, what are you saying about the opportunity that's going to connect and engage with them? So even if you are advertising on those diverse job boards, what are you actually saying? So one of the things that we actually ask every single one of our clients that's posting on our diversity job board is, what is it about diversity? What are you trying to reach and how are you going to support? So those are the key questions they have to articulate to make sure that it's not just a tick box exercise, because I think there's a lot of frustration from candidates from diverse communities where they think it's just a tick box exercise. Nobody wants to be hired because somebody's ticking a box. Say, hey, look, we've hired women. Hey, look, we've hired people from ethnic minority background. You know, it's making sure that your opportunity is accessible to everybody. So you've got to be where everybody is. Even if you're in a niche market, it doesn't matter. Articulate that to say, we might be in a niche market, but here's how we're trying to get more people to come into our sector. Because if you're only advertising it in your niche market to your niche audience, that's all you're ever going to get. So you've got to cast the net out wide. Social media is great, but it's great only because it's reaching the audience that you already have. How do you engage with a much wider audience? This is where you've got to then start bringing other communities into it, you know, whether it's gender, whether it's ethnicity, LGBTQ plus disability. Where are these communities, and how can you share your opportunities within those communities to make sure that they're also seeing it? So it's not just sitting on your website and waiting for people to come to your website. You also have to go to where these candidates are.
Mm-hmm. And I guess again, it's kind of, there's a couple of other points here. You know, I guess when we talk about inclusion, we're actually sort of actively talking about, you know, not being not excluding people. And you know, somebody's asked, what about long application procedures after the job advert as well? So you've got this kind of, you've got the job advert, you might have gotten into the actual community and got some people interested, but you know, how you then bring them on is obviously really different. You know, you have to be very sort of involved in that process as well, keep them involved in what you're doing. So do you think that would put a lot of people off, like longer interview processes from an exclusion perspective?
I think one area that I think needs a lot of work in this particular area is graduate recruitment. Yeah. Because that's, you know, or even not even graduate recruitment, but kind of apprenticeship level or college leavers. But I'll take graduates as an example. The application process for some graduate schemes is unbelievably long. And you know, it's pages and pages and pages. Like the job descriptions themselves tend to be very generic, and then you're getting a graduate to fill out this huge application form to then get you know, a paragraph rejection in an email. And I think that if, you know, like inclusion, you know, the earlier you give people opportunity to live to work to their full potential starts at the beginning of their career. And I think that, I know, Sarah, you've done a lot of work with kind of working with universities in terms of what universities can do to prepare graduates for that, to that leap into the workplace. But some graduate application forms are just, they're more of a deselection process than a selection process. And I think large employers, I think, need to really take a good look at kind of how they are recruiting their graduates, and also like talking about kind of the
the language as well, kind of within those job descriptions, you know, using words like, you know, the word articulate is used a lot. Like, what does that mean? Like, do you have to speak quite posh to be articulate? I don't know. Like, if someone's from a slightly different background and might not be articulate as this organization thinks, that might put them off kind of going into a certain field of work. And so I do think that, you know, if you're going to put a candidate through a really long application process, they have to feel like they're getting something back from it. They have to be benefiting from it as well. And it seems, again, I think those processes in particular are very imbalanced.
I think that does link to another question, actually, which is, and this is something that I personally, and this is not in any way scientific, but I think there's a lot of fear around this process, because there's a lot of fear of getting it wrong as well. So people maybe that are in an existing culture that's already not very inclusive or hasn't got a large diverse workforce, maybe there is a kind of sense of, actually we'll stay in our lane because we actually are a bit scared of stepping out. So do you think there's an element of things not changing because people are more fearful of getting it wrong rather than right? And actually maybe, you know, there might be a chance that you end up excluding some people for the, you know, trying to be inclusive in others. And the question really is, what are the best courses of action that you can take to change that sort of mindset? Cynthia, do you want to pick that one up?
Yes, sorry, I was just trying to find the questions on here. So yeah, so it's if we're getting it wrong with it. Yeah, and I think, look, you know, for me, I think it's okay to get things wrong. I think there's this fear that people don't want to offend, or, you know, but unless, you know, people learn from, you know, ask the question, and people are fearful of asking, you know, what's the right thing to say? What's the wrong thing to say? Ask the question, because without doing that, or without sometimes having those courageous conversations, we're all tiptoeing around the subject, and that's how we get things wrong. So really be upfront about what is it that you're trying to, you know, what's the right terminology? What's the right kind of language to use so that you're not excluding anyone else? So ask. If you don't know, you don't have anyone internally that you can ask, there's so many places where you can find that information. So if it's about writing the right kind of job description on there, then, you know, what's the right terminology to describe a certain group or to say this, then ask the question and then put it on there. But, you know, for me, I think we shouldn't be fearful to want to try new things, because again, you know, that's how we don't develop and that's how we don't change. We'll always stay the same unless we think outside the box and move forward and explore different ways of doing things. So it's really about, you know, just asking people to say, right, this is what we're trying to achieve. How do we best go about it? And then at least, you know, you've been given the right kind of advice. Or if you've tried something that's not worked, why has it not worked? Look at what you did that didn't work. What was the feedback? What was it that you need to change about what you did that maybe had the negative kind of connotation from what you're trying to achieve, and learn from that and then get it right. So that there is that bit of just sometimes ask the question. You know,
yeah. Because you're right, because it's actually people, I think there might be a tendency to see it as a very binary kind of road, a very linear process, whereas actually you're on a journey and you're kind of exploring all of the different areas of how to go about it in the first place. So maybe being much more open-minded and coming at it with a just really sort of broad but open kind of approach to ask questions is the first place to start, really. That's
challenge and ownership are the two, like, kind of, I guess, important words here, because I think if there's no one within your organization whose job it is to challenge the business on who they are recruiting for and what is on their job descriptions, unless you've got that ownership somewhere within your HR team and your recruitment team, it's going to be hard to really bring on any change. I think there has to be someone within your organization who has the knowledge and the gravitas to go to hiring managers and say, right, so you say this job needs to be 5 days a week in the office. Why does it have to be 5 days a week in the office? You say you need someone from a Russell Group university. Why do you need someone from a Russell Group? Like, what is the real reason? Is it because everyone else in the team is from that background? Is there an actual reason? If not, let's broaden it out. Let's change the language. Let's change what we're looking for. But unless I think you've got that person or that team who own that within your business, I think it will be, if you just send a message out to the entire organization going, we need to be better at writing job descriptions, no one's going to take ownership for it, because everyone's got too much to do. Everyone's got something else to think about.
But again, to that point as well, is not being afraid to push back. You know, sometimes I think we're so eager to please that we'll just say, okay, we'll just put it out like that. Ask, why do you want, you know, tell me exactly what it is that you think you're going to get by going this particular way, or getting somebody from a Russell Group university versus somebody that's gone somewhere else. Help me understand, you know. And I think sometimes when you are actually getting them to articulate, a lot of the times they don't have an answer. They say, well, because we've always done it that way. Well, why have we always done it that way? And I think don't be afraid to kind of, you know, challenge, you know, in the right kind of way, but ask why they're specifically wanting people from that background. What is it about that they think is good? Could that not be from somewhere else? You know, does that mean it's less good if it's somebody that's gone to a different university that's not a Russell group one as well? But I think this is where it's that educating piece again. You know, we've got to educate hiring managers. We've got to educate ourselves too, and learn some of those bad behaviors that we've picked along the way, because that's how things have always been done. Just because it's how things have always been done doesn't mean it's right. It doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it fit for purpose. So, you know, challenge where you can challenge, but be challenged in the right way and ask, well, why? You know, why is that? You know, and I think a lot of the times you will get the answer. You know, if somebody's saying, well, because I always think this, then you go, yeah, okay, well, whatever. So I think just being comfortable enough to be able to not just say yes and nod your head and be a people pleaser. If you don't agree with it, you know, speak out.
And I mean, I guess that, again, that plays a lot to the culture piece within an organization, doesn't it? Again, it's one of those things that actually questioning the JD will kind of reveal quite a lot about the actual workplace, the obstacles in the way of having more inclusion and a more inclusive mindset. I mean, what's the role of leaders in this? What's the, you know, for sort of, you know, people that are speaking at C-suite level, or that, you know, have those relationships? What's, you know, how important is the leadership mindset in this, and what can be done to help leaders kind of understand how important this is, especially right now when talent is in high, like as you said, high in demand and short in supply?
I think you've got to look at the sustainable approach to this. I think there's a lot out there about, you know, if you look on LinkedIn and social media about different ways to grow your business, whatever, there's lots of people talking about hacks at the moment. And I don't like hacks, because that implies that you're trying to cheat the system some way. I think that, you know, you could do something now that might mean you know, bring on a load of people, but unless it comes from the top and the leaders truly understand why this is important and the commercial benefit and the business benefit to having a diverse workforce, they have to understand that. They have to understand why it's important to the business. And there are so many studies out there, and Cynthia, you probably know more about this than me, but there are so many studies about saying, like, diverse teams perform better. Like, it's fact. It's not just an opinion, it is fact. There are studies that say this, both from a commercial perspective and a productivity perspective. And so leaders have to keep that in mind when they are putting these changes in place. Because if it's just, you know, I was speaking to one business and they, you know, saying something like, oh, well, the first thing we did is we, our board are all white men, so we just took their photos off the website. I'm like, brilliant. I mean, that's, well, what is that doing? That's just not doing anything. You have to understand, like, what you really need to do, like fundamental change internally, and it's not going to happen overnight. But if the leader can talk about it and believe it, because you can see people aren't stupid. You can see if someone's saying it because they believe that from a reputation perspective they need to do diversity, people will see through that. And there are studies also that say kind of actually your leaders have to believe it, but in order for something like people, I don't know, 67% of people believe what the employees say, and 11% of people believe what the leaders of the organization say. So it's like, but for the employees to believe it, the leader needs to be there as well. So it's, again, like, I don't think it will happen overnight, but if you've got a leader who truly understands and believes why this is important, that's the key. And I don't think you can kind of plaster over the cracks with quick wins from this perspective. I think it will take work, but they have to believe it in the first place. They have to understand why it's important.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. And I think
Sorry, Cynthia, please carry on.
Oh, no, I was just agreeing with Hannah, saying, you know, it's really important. I think leaders need to lead by example, but they need to lead by example by actually believing in that change, you know, as opposed to just ticking boxes, to your point, where they just take the photos off the website. That's done nothing. There's no impact there, right? So it's really, for me, it's leading by example, but also showing and transparency. You know, be transparent. If you're not diverse, but you're on a journey, talk about that. This is where we are. This is where we're trying to get to. And these are the steps that we're going to take to achieve that. And this is how all of us play a part. You know, diversity isn't just something that the leaders do or the people in the organization. This is for everybody. If you want to have an inclusive workforce, everybody has to take accountability for that change and to drive that change. So this is where we all need to speak up. We all need to call for action and hold our leaders to account, because unless we're holding them to account, nothing ever happens. So
brilliant. Vive la revolution, as we would say. Maru has been championing. I'm really conscious we've got a couple of little questions, but we're coming up to sort of our closing time. So I guess it's just, you know, there was a lot to unpack there, and we're going to circulate the deck and the slide that we went through today, so you've got some practical tips on how to take this forward. But please do stay in touch with us. We'll also circulate everybody's contact details to all of our attendees. Thank you very much for coming, and hope you enjoy the rest of your day. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye.
thank you, everyone.